All right, what up, everybody? How you doing out there? Welcome back to the Yama channel. My name is Thinker St. James. This is last week's fight, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend, my co-host, the Ohio player, and the one true king of Africa, Chase Parton. How you doing, brother?
Bro, I'm here. Another Monday. I can't believe that we actually successfully do this. Like, as an adult, it's really hard to schedule things, but the fact that Monday is set and we are always ready to go, shout out you.
Second only to the fights, my man. My favorite day of the week right now with all the stuff that we do. I appreciate it as well. What'd you think of this card?
Dude, this was a really good one. This was really good. I don't know, maybe I am starting to buy into the crowds. Like, the crowds do make a lot of the shows, but like, wow, this one was really, really fun. I can't say enough. John Dong, appreciate you, man.
What up, brother?
I hope you love this card too.
Absolutely, yeah. This card was very good, I have to say as well. The Australian crowd is always fantastic. That is just a steadfast, tried and true rule. The Aussies really know how to bring the energy whenever they're down there. Plus, that arena was fucking massive, man. That arena down in Perth. We were looking at the way it was set up. It's like, I think that it's because it's all one level that goes up as opposed to multi-tiered. Like, it just went back, bro. I was looking out over when it started, before everybody like really started filling it out. I was just like, man, this thing it's a crazy amount of people in this place when it gets booked up and filled out. And it did get very well filled out. So yeah, really, really good. A lot of energy and a great card to boot. So I'm glad all those people down in Perth got to see that. So as you might know, if you've been here before, but if not, if you're new, I'll tell you anyway. We are going to be breaking down every single fight from this card. If you've got comments that are outside of whatever fight we're talking about at the moment, we will come back to those at the end of the stream. But we'll be going over every single fight in order, so we'll hit everything that happened. And there's a lot to talk about on this card. A whole bunch of good fights, a whole bunch of interesting things, in some of those fights. Lot going on here. So let's get started with the first one here. This is Stuart Nickel versus Jesus Aguilar. This fight was surprising, I would say, but a really great opener to the card. What did you think of Aguilar?
As soon as I saw Mexico and that number was in the plus, I knew where I was putting my money, bro. Mexico underdogs. It doesn't make sense. The statistics, I'm sure they back it up. What they are very good at winning fights when they are counted out. Like this dude, he didn't do much. He threw 3 shots. He landed 3 shots out of 5 and then finished the fight. Like, and not just finished him, bro. He choked him out, and then he tried to even help him by wiggling his legs, bro. It was just embarrassing for the other dude, man.
Yeah, dude, talk about joining the Gilly Goose Club over here, man. So one thing I will say is that regardless of underdog status, what made me put my money on Aguilar was the fact that he came in overweight. That is unfortunate.
Oh,
yeah, he is the only person on this card to miss weight. So it's like, bro, you're the odd man out on that one. You get an asterisk. That really does suck, especially considering how nice of a finish it was. So, can't give him all of the props that he deserves. Had he made weight, he would be getting full favorite status from me. But regardless of that, I saw that he had missed weight. I was like, Chelsea Chandler has to be a fluke, missing weight and still losing. Well, at least when it comes to the men and people in general who are not potato sacks, it's going to be the guy who misses weight is generally going to be the one having the advantage. And in this case, it proved to be correct. Put my money down on Aguilar. Could not have predicted at all how that was going to finish because, man, one thing that I wanted to mention with this is that we see time and time again guys who jump guillotine just at random whenever they think that there's an opening to do it, and then they get shrugged off as quickly as they jump. And I'm like, bro, if you are going to, if you don't have it 10,000%, you are basically asking to be in a negative position after that sequence goes down, right? Like, there's really no good way that it ends up for you if you jump guillotine and it doesn't sink. You're either going to end up on your back, you're going to end up in an off-center position, off balance. There's a bunch of bad things that can happen to you if that is the case. Finally, a dude actually jumping guillotine with a solid game plan and getting it and getting the finish out of it. I was very impressed by that.
Yeah, and it was pretty. Look, he had it tight, and for the minute that he had it, I was thinking like, oh, there's no way it's like actually going to work because he's been sitting here for a minute fighting it off. Like he's got to be breathing somehow. And then he said something to the ref. The ref checked it, and at first he did like give a little resistance, but good for the ref that he noticed like it was not good because
Oh
when
yeah,
he let go.
yeah. I wanted to
Yeah, no,
mention
go
that
ahead.
too. Like the way that the hand came down, it looked like he was resisting it, like as if to say I'm still in it. But
Yeah,
because as we both do our solo watch alongs here on at Yama Show and Chase on his channel. I was watching with the Vitz King, and Vitz thought that he was like protesting like he was okay, but he thought that also it could have been that he was going to tap and then he went out before he could tap. It didn't really look like that to me, but either way, whatever it was I think it was just the last gasps of consciousness leaving him, and that was just where his hand ended up, because by the time that hand hit the ground, he was already gone.
yeah. So good on the ref, like for
Yeah,
real, because he like, dude, when he let go of the choke, dude, the eyes were rolled back, and he was damn near lifeless for a good minute.
absolutely. Yeah, there were actually a couple of good refereeing moments and good reflections on the Australian Commission on this card. We'll get to those when they come up. But I actually, as a person who pays very close attention to the commissions and how they're governing the sport, I was actually pretty happy with the Australian Commission on this one in a couple of places. This being one of them for sure. One thing I did want to mention here, being that when we're doing the watch along, me and Vitz are generally talking a whole bunch. I'm not listening to the commentary as much. This was one time that I did key into a little bit of the commentary, and I wanted to make this point. Dominic Cruz, because this goes back to I made a video a while back now about Chris Taioni. It was at the first Noche UFC card, and the standing anaconda choke that people thought was an early stoppage, whatever. It turns out that it wasn't. You can go back and watch that video for all of the details on that. But in that video and in that sequence that I'm talking about there, Dom Cruz was the first one to jump on the referee and say that it was an early stoppage. He wasn't out. He doesn't know what he's looking at. You got to know what you're looking at when you're looking at these things, blah, blah, blah. This fight, Dominic Cruz did the same fucking thing, and that dude was dead. All right? So, my point in saying all of this is just that, Dom, you're a smart guy and your fight IQ is very high. You're not always right, brother. You're not always correct. You need to realize that you're not in there in the cage at, the closeness, the proximity that the referee is. You don't have all of the information that he might have. So, like, every time that these commentators, because they're coloring the perception of the fans when they do that. People who don't follow the sport as closely definitely would not remember what I was talking about on the first Noche card. Those types of things. It's like, you are the representation. You're like the avatar for the fans that like has a little bit more of a knowledge of the sport. You're a representative of the information that you're conveying, and you color people's vision of the sport that way. So, bro, you need to step back every once in a while and realize that you don't have all the answers, just like Sway.
And yeah, so at the end of this card, I remember seeing a tweet, and it was probably after the main event, of course, and it was like, if Dom Cruz says no, he's fine, he's not out, end the fight right now. It's done. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's
but
just it just gets me because, and we talk about that a little bit, at least in my chat. That always comes up, how DC is always the first one to say, "Oh, that looks tight," and then they slip right out of it, that kind of thing. Joe Rogan, is often, "Oh, that was heavy," he's hurt.
yeah.
These guys have their little like idiosyncrasies with that stuff, but it's the perception that bothers me, because there are people who don't follow the sport like we do, and it colors the way that they view it. So these guys just need to realize that they're not always 100% correct about these things. And had the referee been listening to Dom Cruz, that dude would legitimately be dead. He would be in a
Yeah.
coffin right now.
Yeah, that's crazy. But this was such a good fight to open the card. Like,
Absolutely.
not often. Okay, submissions are fun, but sometimes, it doesn't get it doesn't get us going, and unless it's like a really good scramble kind of deal. But this one was a really good one to start the card. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, fun way to start the card for sure. Nickel obviously needs to work on the defense there a little bit, because I mean that jump and guillotine transition was very quick. I mean, I guess that's a tribute to the skills of Jesus Aguilar, but still, I mean, like it's tough to defend when it is that quick, but the awareness has to be there for that kind of thing because, as we've said about these other fighters, if they don't get it, they're in a bad position. So you could have been that guy to be in a dominant position had that not all happened. Unfortunately, you weren't. So there's some back to the drawing board for you to do, Mr. Nickel, especially coming in as a sizable favorite, not super high, but high enough. I mean, minus 220 on ESPN's odds.
Let me actually ask before we move to the next one.
Sure.
How well were your picks done on this card?
Well, I did okay. I actually ended up coming out pretty well in the final stretch. I had a couple of parlays that got busted, but the final three fights, well, I think I did the I think it was the Rosenstrike fight, and then Hooker and the main event. And then that cashed. So I actually made out pretty well overall. Had a couple of little snags in there. This parlay actually worked out really nice for me, though. I had Jesus Aguilar and San Kanan. So yeah, I did pretty all right in the grand scheme of things. What about you?
Yeah, I would actually say that the prelims, they went just about as good as they could up until the last three fights on the prelims. And then the main event, I honestly think it was just one of these cards that were easy to predict. Like, I think everybody kind of did like the verdict scores that I've been seeing. Like, I know I got like 10K, which I'm not even trying to brag here, but I've seen a lot of people get the 10% fucking badge for this card. So
Yeah, I think I ended up with a 40%er because I didn't get all the finishes, the methods correct exactly. But actually, it's a good
yeah,
point. We don't really talk about verdict too much, but I am at Yama Show on verdict. What's your verdict?
I think it's creative player. Yeah,
Creative
something like
player. So
that.
yeah, if you have the Verdict app, it's a great way to track your progress on your picks and keep track of how often you've been correct and incorrect with fights. So download the Verdict app. It's really a great tool to keep track of everything. I enjoy it very much. So shout out to those guys for putting that together. Yeah, and follow both of us. We'll check out your picks and critique you.
Yep.
All right, so that was the first card there to start, or the first fight to start the card off. Moving on, we've got Song Kanan versus Ricky Glenn. I mean, Ricky Glenn is one of those dudes. He's a tough guy, but man, when he starts gassing, bro, it all goes out the window. It seems.
Yeah, this is another one that was, I think, just I know the first fight wasn't easy to predict, but we'll get into more that I felt were easy to predict. This one right here, I mean, what can you say? Like, it was really a dog walk, like 30-26. So the fight was one-sided if a 30-26 is thrown out there. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
And
mean,
I will say this too, before I let you go.
no, sure.
This is probably one of the least good fights on the card. I think this is probably second, maybe if not last.
Yeah, well, this is the first of I think maybe like two. I'll have to go. They'll probably come to me as we go through them. But this was definitely the first of more than one that I said you should probably be able to finish this fight. Like Song was so far up so early because that's the thing that Glenn, unfortunately, like he gassed fairly early. It seemed. I mean, and again, tough guy. Able to stay in there, and he was fighting up until the end, amazingly. But amazingly that he was able to, not fighting amazingly, unfortunately for him. But yeah, it was completely one sided, and Song looked pretty okay for a guy who's also not had necessarily the greatest performances in the past. I mean. He was a pretty heavy favorite in this one, I think, because of who his opponent was. But it's not like he's been a world ender himself. So this could have very well been a nice time for Ricky Glenn to show out and show that he's improved a little bit. But both you see both of the records, 22-8 now and 22-9 for Glenn, and it's like those are probably both pretty representative of the fighters that they are. And unfortunately, like Ricky wears that heavier, I would say.
Yeah, it's this just not much that was getting me excited during this fight. Like there wasn't any big moments. Like I was just watching a really sloppy dude just fumble around the fucking cage, and the other dude was just punching him. Like it wasn't. I didn't have a moment like this is the dude who dropped Ian Gary. I was sitting here waiting to see like a moment where it's like, oh, he can finish it. Oh, he can finish it. And it's like just nothing came. Just nothing of this fight was interesting, really.
Yeah, and again, I go back to saying that like throughout, I'd say probably at least like halfway through the fight, I was saying like Song, you can probably put a combo together that can put this guy away. Or I mean, by the time at that point, halfway through, he was definitely tired enough that you could have taken him down and done something on the ground. I think that there was probably a little bit more that Song could have done to make this a little bit more of a definitive statement of a fight. It just kind of turned into a bit of a filler fight. Not bad, but like you said, not great. And also, we're also colored through the lens of the rest of the card as well. And when you're one of the less entertaining fights on a really decent card overall, then you're going to get overshadowed by the rest of the guys. So unfortunate in that respect as well. Got to get those finishes, man.
Yeah, definitely looking back, one of the worst, but even in the moment, like right after it ended, like I had this, I probably had the thought like there's better to come. Like there's for sure better to come after this.
Yeah, well, and we're starting off the card with a really nice early quick finish. So,
True.
it's the roller coaster of the fight, the conducting of the symphony, so to speak, and it's a little bit of a low point. So, it ends up starting to come back a little bit as we go on, but decent though. I mean, it wasn't like the worst fight I've ever seen for sure.
Yep.
All right, moving on to Tom Nolan versus Alex Reyes. So this fight, I mean, Tom Nolan, super super heavy favorite to win this fight. I would say that Alex Reyes did a goddamn good job when those odds were where they were at, man.
Yeah, my thing is if you were a minus 1500 dog, that should mean you are finishing the fight in the first round, not you
Correct.
are gonna decisively go to decision. Like, I don't know. I really don't get how, Tom Nolan came in at such a big favorite just for what he does best to be very similar in comparison to what the other dude did. Like 104 strikes landed to 89. It's like that ain't no minus 1500 dog. I get you were winning, and I never at one point thought you weren't winning. I just know you could have finished this fight and you could have like not had the judges maybe, give a fucking weird score. Like, I
Well,
don't
I
know.
you know I would honestly I would kind of agree with the judge that gave it 29-28. I forget which round it was off the top of my head, but there was one round that I said I might give that to Alex. So I mean, like the point stands though exactly what you're saying. When you're a minus 15 fucking hundred, buddy, I mean that this needs to be a one punch knockout kind of situation. That to justify that number, that's insanity. I mean, granted, it's not like these guys pick their own odds. Obviously, this is what the bookmakers are putting out there, so it's not their fault necessarily that they are how they are. However, I mean, I like what we were saying coming into this fight, or what I'd mentioned a couple of times, is that Tom Nolan did get touched in his last fight. I mean, like he's not untouchable over here. So like I would say that Reyes tied him up a couple of times effectively. He didn't land super super heavy. I would think that was one of my criticisms throughout the fight on Reyes' side, is that he doesn't seem to have like a great amount of generated power throughout the course of the fight. Like, when you're starting off, it's more acceptable to be throwing a little bit lighter to, get your range, figure out what you want to do, all that kind of stuff. But throughout the course of the fight, you really need to be ramping that up, especially if you're, having an equal or greater amount of opposition from your opponent. So, I mean, I didn't think that he necessarily looked overly powerful, like in his hands or with his striking in general. But overall, I mean, like I said, I think that there were a couple of times where he was getting a little bit better of the exchanges. And this was way closer. Exactly what you said, dude. I mean, the fact that this went to a unanimous decision, even if it was a unanimous decision, is kind of ridiculous.
I mean, listen, he's just lucky that judge that later on in the card didn't pull some weird shit and cost this dude the fight somehow or gave him a draw or something. Like, I can't imagine that you come in with these odds and you are somebody who can put it down. You can, throw some hands. And it's just really unfortunate that he didn't fucking finish. Like, that's really all I had to say at the end of it. Is like, the Discord was mad. They were like, you're just a hater. Like, when it goes to the judges, you're just hating. It's like, well, in this case, yes, I'm okay with that. Like, I will be the number one hater for the dude who doesn't finish the fight that he was tagged to fucking be the god of. Like,
Well, and also it's like, haterism or not, it colors your vision going forward. It's what we always say, like about the performances informing the next fight. Like, if you're out there putting money down on the next fight, it's like, okay, well, yeah, Tom Nolan had one he got a knockout, but he got touched, and then he was a huge favorite and went to unanimous decision. Patterns start to form here in how you're viewing these fighters. If you go out and make definitive statements, then you negate all of that. You can't say anything if the guy gets a fucking crazy ass knockout. Oh, okay, well, shit. Now Tom Nolan's on the hot streak.
Yeah, and to have some, benefit of the doubt, he is still very young in his career, 8-1. Shout at him for at least getting the win. It wasn't close, maybe one round was, but you did do what you were supposed to do. Unfortunately, as an elite striker, as what you're like, wanting to be, you're gonna have to get finishes, dog. Like you can't just be pitter pattering all the way to the belt, like with no other game. Like so,
Yeah, but you
it's
make a good
just
point. He is early on, so there is plenty of time for him to to make those adjustments, get a little bit better, and add the added strength to get those finishes. But one other note here too is that this is Alex Reyes being the brother of Dominic Reyes, the first of three siblings on this card, and yeah, three. It was
no.
Reyes.
I think
Reyes,
isn't that
Walker,
four?
and oh, is there a fourth? Did I miss one?
Burns,
Reyes, yeah, Reyes, Burns, and Walker. Who's the fourth?
Tafa.
Oh, and well, yeah, okay, Tafa. Yeah, I don't. I guess I don't put them in the same class because I think Junior and Justin sort of they both kind of have their own thing going on. Where I guess I class those guys differently because when you have one sibling that's somewhat of a star versus one sibling that's
Gotcha.
what I would say, quote unquote, the lesser sibling.
Gotcha.
But no, but you're right though. I mean that is that also does track too. But either way, though, I make that point to say, as far as lesser siblings go, this was a very unfortunate card for the lesser siblings because you have, we'll talk about all of them when we get there. But this being the first of a bad night for siblings of otherwise, other greater fighters.
Yeah, and I want to say too that although Tom Nolan didn't get the finish, once again, you did help my verdict scores by getting the dub. I had a good amount of XP on it. I only got like 200 out of it because you were just destined to fucking win. But it is what it is. After this fight, though, the card really started to take off, in my opinion.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. So I mean, another I'd say decent fight, but not a barn burner. Just a nice decisive win, but then you get to fucking this fight. Good Lord. Jack Jenkins versus Herbert Burns. I mean, look, we'll talk about it here, but I'm just going to say it straight out. Herbert Burns should not be in the UFC. That's just point blank period statement.
So I went into this fight. Everybody in the Discord was like, what is it? Jack Jenkins? Jack
Yes.
Jenkins is this guy. He's on the way up. Like, I swear to you, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I've called Herbert Burns a lot of things, and I've been wrong about a lot of people. And maybe this is the day that the Discord is so high up on somebody, and Herbert Burns is the fucking world killer, and he comes out and gets some crazy submission. I had it down in verdict. Just why not? I ain't betting. No, dumbest decision ever. This guy is so bad. I can't tell you how many times he will get punched and then just lay on the ground and then just like crawl to his opponent just to like get up. It's so infuriating because he does nothing. He almost had a submission in round 2. Like he almost did. And I was like, wow, round 2 submission verdict. Here we come to the moon. And no, he's terrible. He can't do anything that's like quality of, substance.
Yeah, this was an embarrassing performance, I would say. And I'm always the first person to try to give these fighters as much slack as I can. They're professional athletes. They're doing stuff that 99% of the world could never dream of doing or want to do most of the time. They are generally at the highest levels in the UFC. I try to be very fair and in the assessments that I give to these athletes. This was an embarrassment. Herbert Burns looks like he never wants to be in the fight ever. Like he is so slow. He is so disinterested in engaging. And so, I mean, this is all coming off of the last fight of Herbert Burns, you might recall, was in Atlantic City. And I remember that because there's an entire video on the channel about that. You can watch that and see my thoughts on that fight. But all of my informing of this fight just went doubled in this fight. I mean, like everything that he did in that fight in Atlantic City just was 10 times worse here. And it was worse here too because it went on for longer here. I mean, like he ended up getting taken out I think in the second round in the Atlantic City fight. And in this one, it went on for longer into the third round, and it was just time and time again of him being on his back, begging Jack to come to the ground with him when like there was no impetus for Jack to do that. I mean, there were times earlier on before he finally did start asking him to stand up where I was just yelling at the screen, Jack, just stand him up. Like fucking, what are you kicking his legs for? Step back and get the ref to stand him. I mean, he's got nothing for you on the feet. Like I would not be messing around at all with anything he's doing on the ground. Finally, Jack ended up doing that, but just time and time again, this was just an absolutely infuriatingly frustrating performance, and really does inform the statement that I made at the start of this thing. Herbert Burns, I mean, I don't think that he should be fighting, period. I think that there are plenty of other careers that you could be excelling at. I don't think mixed martial arts is right for you. Just because your brother is great at it doesn't mean you are. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. I was gonna say Jack Jenkins ate him up with the leg kicks, and he should have finished it in the second round. And I was actually very annoyed, like, oh, okay, he's waiting to do it in the third round, I guess, because at the end of the second round, Herbert couldn't even walk, and then he kept getting him into the positions where he's kicking his legs with him on his back, and it's like annoying. So third round comes, and Herbert is obviously just like giving up. He doesn't want to fucking fight. And actually, one more point. I remember there was a point Herbert was laying on his back in round 2, and Jack Jenkins was just standing there holding his foot, just standing there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, like, why don't you just, like, if you want to just do something, if you're just going to do nothing, why don't you just like grab his leg and just like yank him? Like, I don't know, do something that would make me think like, oh, okay, like cool, you're embarrassing him now because like he's a punk. Like, but no, you just standing there holding bro's foot, letting him just chill, cushioned up on the canvas. And then you did finish, but man, I can't look at that because Herbert Burns is just that bad. Like that doesn't really do much for me, Jack. And I know I should be a little more lenient and whatever, but Herbert is just terrible.
Yeah, well, this is another one. We talk about the blank canvas idea. I'd say that Jack took advantage of it once he finally started to figure out that that's what it was. I think he was for some reason a little bit slow to the uptake that that's what was going on, because really from the start of this fight, Herbert Burns was just so disengaged. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy does not want to be in fights. I don't see any kind of heart in him whatsoever to actually be a competitor in this sport. So you have so much real estate to just do whatever you want for the most part, especially if he's going to be going to his back every time that he's even in a compromised position whatsoever. There were so many times, especially also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think that I am. I think that it was Mark Goddard was the referee for this one. If that was the case, I mean, Mark Goddard is the first dude who'll still stand him up in a fucking second. I mean, like, as I'm saying, all you got to do is just disengage. Just be like, nope, get the fuck up. And Mark Goddard will be like, hey, right away, sir, So, I mean, there was plenty of times where you could have, like, maybe finished this a little bit quicker. Still ended up getting the finish. So, all's well that ends well, I guess. But, yeah, I mean, really, the story of this fight is not as much Jack Jenkins as it is Herbert Burns being just atrocious. And also, one other thing I did want to mention, too, before let your other thoughts go in there, is that if you go back to the Atlantic City card, Herbert Burns landed a nut shot when he was clinched up or like in tight range and did it again in this one. I'm like, bro, you're making the same mistakes. He got a point taken in the Atlantic City.
That ain't a mistake, brother. That's him trying to fucking buy time, get his way out the fight.
I mean, very well could be that, and like I wouldn't necessarily put that on a fighter if it wasn't Herbert Burns, but you could be absolutely correct about that when it comes to him. And again, he got the point taken in the other fight, so he got lucky that he didn't, land 2 of them and get a point taken here to add insult to this already insulting performance.
Yeah, I want to say maybe it was towards later, maybe even just the main event. There was some cage grabs that I was really upset about. But other than that, I think the officiating was. We'll get to another one that was interesting. But other than that, officiating was pretty good. Mark Goddard, like you said, he don't play around. So when Herbert wasn't getting up, normally he's, you can get some reps who are like, come on, up, and like, no, he just waved it off and like, good deal. Like Herbert obviously is cooked. So
yeah,
get his brother to carry him out there again.
Pretty much. I mean, and that's the thing too. It's like, look, just because you've got the connection in the family does not mean that you have to be doing this, bro. I don't know who's putting you up to this because again, I'm only saying this because of how he comes off in his fights. If he was going out there and fighting with everything that he had and still coming up short, it'd be a completely different story. It's like, look, bro, you just need to get a little bit more technical, XYZ. There's a million different ways that it all could play out. But when you look as disconnected from the sport you're competing in as he does, I'm like, dude, let Gilbert take care of all that stuff, man. You could be doing any number of different things. You could still even be working within the sport in a different capacity. You don't have to be in the cage. Stop going to it.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. And shout out to Arrogant Savage in the chat, basically echoing what we're saying. Dude is always annoying to watch. I mean, beyond annoying at this point, in my opinion.
Yep.
All right. Moving on from that slop fest, we got Casey O'Neill versus your girl, Luana Santos. Sorry to say that Casey O'Neill's striking is pretty goddamn nice.
She is ranked for a reason. I see that. I am very upset at Vegas for having Luana as the favorite on this one because it was short notice and she clearly looked like she was not a short notice show up person because she was gassed pretty early on, like into the second round, I think. Maybe after the first round, second round started, she was like pretty cooked. But that just no, she couldn't have any game after that. She couldn't get any grappling done. She tried to do her little judo flip at one point, but Casey said no, and she cooked her on the feet. So
yeah, I mean that's to me. We talk about the stories of the fights. I would say that Casey O'Neill striking really stood out to me as pretty goddamn crispy. I mean, I do agree that at short notice it was a little bit unfortunate for Santos in that respect, but O'Neill, she started off pretty hot and stayed pretty hot throughout the entire fight. So, I mean, there wasn't too much of like explosiveness in this fight to the point where there was like anything that sticks out to me as like, oh, I made a note about it or anything. It was just a really nice consistent 3-rounder of it's a solid mid-level, like not mid-level as in like mid, but like just nothing too overly explosive, just consistent, I guess is the better way to put it. Consistent striking that was just landing nicely. And also O'Neill moves really nicely. So when she's staying at range, able to get her couple of shots in, I think it was throwing off Santos, who was trying to get her own game plan off and wasn't able to execute on what she was trying to do.
yeah, and like you said, this was just like a good, consistent, like decent fight. Like I said, this isn't the worst one on the card, and to be the only female fight on the card, I mean, you're only standing up against the male fighter. So as long as you're not last, and it wasn't the most boring, I wouldn't say it was boring at all. Like I mean, like I said, the card picked up, after last fight, and this one was pretty fun to watch, especially her little ray gun dance after it.
That was
She
great.
she did hit that. I'm not gonna lie. She made it look like Ray Gun could have done some actual saucy shit, but like I mean,
Yeah,
maybe she just had to look like her because Casey, I'll give it to you. She
yeah.
might be making her way up the pound for pound.
Fair enough. I can feel you on that one. But yeah, no, that was great. Nice way to cap off that fight with her little kangaroo hops. I enjoyed that, or whatever that other one is, the
Yeah.
hand to feet thing. I don't know if there's a name for that, but whatever it is, she did it.
Bullshit.
Yeah, really. But no, yeah, O'Neill. I question as to how far she'll end up going in the rankings based on a performance like that. I think we need to see her up against somebody who's going to be able to stay a little bit more consistent themselves throughout a fight like that. Because it wasn't like she was getting enough opposition for me to be like, oh, she overcame a war to dominate. You know what I mean? Like it was like just doing a consistent amount of striking really was the tail of the fight. So we're gonna have to see somebody who gives her a little bit more to chew on. But win like that, we'll get that. So good for her, and getting a 30-26 on one of those cards, not bad either.
Yeah, see that I mean, compare this to the Song Kanon and Ricky Glenn fight. It's like I was watching somebody beat on somebody I knew had no chance. Like this one, I was thinking like, okay, Luana maybe can pull off something if she just gets a hold of her, gets it on the ground, like maybe something can happen. But watching, really a great performance by Casey. It was fun to see her work. So I
Well,
give it to her.
and you reminded me of something actually before we move on from this one. I was expecting Santos to try to get her to the ground quicker, and it didn't seem like she was really going for that too much. If my memory serves me, I don't remember there being like a lot of times where she was like really, really trying heavy for the takedowns. It seemed like she was comfortable doing the stand up game, and I was a little bit surprised by that because I would have thought that that would have been where she was more comfortable. Trying to get her into a submission situation, but she really didn't seem like she was going for that as part of her game plan in general. It wasn't like, because usually when I see, especially in women's MMA, like where a wrestle heavy person goes in for a takedown and then gets thwarted or takes a heavy shot because of it, generally I'd be more apt to say that spooked her off from trying to go for that again. But it wasn't like there was that was really the case here. If my memory is serving me on this one, so I thought that was a little bit odd, but it might have just been part of the game plan she wanted to have going into this fight. It could have been the short notice aspect of it. There's a couple of different reasons why it might have played out how it did, but I just was a little bit surprised by that.
I do want to say also is I think 30-26 is really harsh for this one. Even 30-27, I think the first round was maybe competitive. I think it maybe could have went either way. Once Luana was gassed, though, definitely Casey took the driver's seat and really great performance. She even had a sub attempt in there. I don't remember what it was. It might have just been like a rear naked or something, but she was at least trying to get it done. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one thing also to note with that is that you don't want to be gassing in women's MMA. That's just that should just be a hard and fast rule. The lower weights for women, like you're going to get lapped if your cardio is not up to snuff. That's across the board with the women. You start gassing out, especially early in a fight, you're going to be in all kinds of trouble going forward. So something to work on for Santos is the cardio.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, so moving on. Josh Coolabau versus Ricardo Ramos over here. A lot of people have a lot of opinions about this fight. I believe that this fight was scored exactly correctly.
I want to go ahead and say that the Discord and I believe that this is all on the fault of Josh.
It
He
is.
is a fucking idiot. Like, okay, first, you want to do some great shit. I think it might have been the first round you got caught in this super deep rear naked choke that you somehow got out of. Like, we were all saying it's over. Like, I don't know how you managed to do it, but you
Yeah.
got through the bell. You were making funny faces at the camera. You were doing good. All time high right there. Now, the second round, you want to start doing ballerina dances and pirouetting. Not looking too good. You maybe still won that round. I think I think it still looks good there. But then the third round, brother, no, you just took the whole round off and you let this dude come back and win the fight. And I don't know if you thought somehow you won the first round, like, or what was going on. Second round, sure, great, give it to you. But then the third round, why the hell do you just not do anything? You let a dude who landed 39 strikes beat you, brother, and like it's really embarrassing because we're all laughing at you. We're all telling you like, what are you doing? You are clearly just not here. I don't know.
Yeah, this was an extremely low fight IQ fight for Kulabau for that reason. When he had one of the best fight IQ moments on the card, I would say, to get out of that rear naked that was sunk. I mean, like he was in really bad shape there for a second when it came to that submission. I mean, that could have easily been a cooked moment. I mean, you're saying that the Discord was saying it was over. I'm pretty sure that me and Vitz were saying the same thing on the watch along. I mean, like for him to get out of that and like to play it up to the crowd a little bit because of what you just did is fine, but you have to know. I mean, as a fighter, again, fight IQ is so vital to this sport. You have to know that you are down that round, brother. I mean, like that is absolutely, yeah. I mean, like you very nearly got finished. The fact that you were able to thwart the submission does not win you the round. So, he comes out in the second round, like you said, he's showboating, he's taunting him, he's doing all this kind of stuff. Maybe you did have a little bit of a better performance in that round, but not enough to swing it. And so even if it was a winning round, you're 1-1 going into that third. And that third, you got controlled for a good amount of it. I think that the decisions were exactly correct. I mean, split decision, fine. I really don't see where one judge would have given him 2 rounds throughout all of what we just described. But the 2 judges that did give it to Ramos, I think they scored it exactly correctly. Brother, you have to be fighting the entire fight. You can't be playing up the crowd. Like, I mean, again, this is a testament to the effectiveness and the quality of the Australian Commission, that if the crowd was going crazy for the hometown guy, which I don't necessarily remember that being the case on the broadcast, but let's just say for argument's sake that they were fucking going wild, like it was a Noche UFC situation there. They're fucking throwing their hats in the air, all this type of shit. The judges didn't let that play into their heads, which I very much appreciate. You call the fight that you see, not the fight that you hear. So I think that they did it exactly correct, and you have to know that you are going into to do your best work at all times in the fight, especially after nearly getting finished in that first round. Low IQ moment.
Yeah, 1-1 is like the best case scenario. Like, what did bro think he scored in that second round? Like, do you think you got like a 10-7, 10-6? Like, where did taking the third round off come from? Because why did your coaches not, hey, 1-1, get into it? Maybe you're down 2-0. We don't know, like something like that, But he really just it was the twin, this one. I don't know. This one ain't the fighter. This is the other brother that it is.
Yo, right. That was pretty funny at the press conference, not gonna lie. But I mean, you're exactly right. That could very well be part of it. The cornering could have been a little bit harsher on him. But either which way, you're 100% correct. There was no reason to be coasting through that third round in the slightest. I mean, I will say in that second round, he was landing the heavier shots. I mean, I do think that he was more effective in that round. He deserved to win that round. But you got to know you're 1-1 at the very least. And I think that more effective cornering would have been to say, yeah, you're down 2. You need to finish this fight.
It's crazy because like it was a perfect underdog moment. The first round you start at the low point, you're about to be finished and you get out and then you build the crowd. Okay. Second round, you have a great performance. You land some heavy strikes, you control the pace. And then, right when we're here with you, like right when we're with you, you just throw it away. It's like you just forgot that you're supposed to like fulfill the end of the fucking fight. Like, I don't know. It was really crazy to see. As Henry, shout out the Australian Henry. He was pissed. Like,
I believe it.
I can't believe this shit. It was so bad to see.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that at the time being 11-3, you're at a very good record on paper. Like that's the type of record that you can take pretty far. Like people see that and say, "Oh man, 11-3." If that could have been 12-3. I mean that's a solid record to be building yourself up on, especially as a younger guy. This was not a loss that you had to take. Again, I really I try to be as fair as possible with these assessments, but the fight IQ was not there for this one, and you really got to have that. You never want to be in the same category as Jalen Turner against Renato Moicano. Very different circumstances, but similar in some ways, and the fight IQ is definitely one of them.
Yep, I agree. This one was just a letdown performance.
Yeah. So Coulibaly needs to tighten up on that kind of stuff because now you're 11-4, and you make that 11-5, and then you're in real dangerous territory.
Yeah, and you want to talk about a roller coaster. Here's where it goes down, and we haven't even gotten to the...
Oh, buddy boy. Yeah. All right. So, okay. Junior Tafa versus Walter Walker. There was a verbal tap in this fight. A lot of people are saying a lot of different things about it. Why don't you tell me what your assessment of it was first, and we'll get into it a little bit deeper.
We were watching in the Discord, and we see the ankle get wrapped up, and we see him rolling. In my opinion, why you stop? They were still rolling. He was clearly defending it the way you're supposed to. The word is, what we were going with is that Walter was the one who was yelling, like kind of screaming and making it seem like verbal tap should be called or something. And Junior did not like the call, obviously, because at the end of it, He went over and approached Walter Walker in like a fucking G, slapped him in the face, called him a punk, flipped him off when he won the match or whatever. But I really don't know the whole story here. Junior Tafa did not seem to like it, and I've seen some posts on his Instagram from the brother, and he didn't seem like he didn't seem like he liked it too much. But
Yeah.
right
So
at the
okay.
end of it, oh wait, one more thing.
Yeah, please.
They called this like ESPN right at the end of it that it was at 1 second. I just thought in the moment, like, wow, 1 second away, you get a verbal tap. That's kind of crazy. But they do have it listed at 4 seconds. Still not better, but like 4 seconds for these big dudes to take one more roll and him to defend it. Like, I don't know why he stopped in the middle of the defense. Like, I don't know. It's
All right.
crazy.
So let me break this down a little bit based on what you're saying here, because when I was watching it, thought it was a little bit strange. There were some things. I'll start from the beginning. All right. So obviously, all of what you said is correct. They're rolling. The legs are locked up. They're rolling. Towards the end of the round, the verbal tap is called, and Tafa doesn't like it. All of that is all correct, right? So what we on the watch along, we've got the wonderful producer Catherine, who is a friend of ours that helps us out with the stream occasionally. Shout out to Catherine. I had just printed a copy of the unified rules, and producer Catherine was reading the rules as we're watching this fight. So we said, "Hey,
Nice.
producer Catherine, why don't you go over and read us the rule about verbal taps?" And to the referee's credit, if you cry out in pain, that can be considered a verbal tap. The circumstances are kind of cut and dry in the rules. If you cry out in any way, if the referee, it's the referee's discretion like anything else, but if they interpret it as such, that is considered a verbal tap. We also just had seen a situation similar to this in PFL not more than a week ago, and I have the name of the fight. It was Oleg Popov versus Linton Vassell, I believe is the fight. I'm pretty sure that was the fight. It was it was on August 2nd. It was the Nashville card of the PFL playoffs, where it was Jason Herzog reffing that fight, and he warned Vassell that he was going to stop the fight because Vassell was crying out. So verbal taps are absolutely a thing. So anybody who's getting upset that was the way that went down, just know that if you cry out there, that it can be considered a verbal tap. Now, let's move on to when I saw your post in the Discord saying that you thought that Walter had been screaming. Because at first I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't know where that was coming from. I went back and watched the finish, and everybody can watch the finish. It's on ESPN's MMA page on YouTube. I'd play it here, but copyright strikes and all that kind of crap. Don't want to risk it. But go and watch it. I listened back, and I think that there is some merit to what you were saying, because Junior does cry out. He does cry out. But what it looked like to me, and where I think this whole thing kind of hinges on, is it looked like to me that Walter cried out first and that Junior was answering him as like a scream back kind of situation. That's what I mean. Look, that's just my assessment of it. I could be completely wrong, but if you watch it back, there are two audible cries out. You hear one faintly, that would have been Walter, especially where the camera was, and I guess the mic placement or whatever. Just because during that sequence, Walter was, I think, kind of closer towards his face down, so he would have been kind of yelling closer to into the mat, or at least side. So he wasn't yelling up to where the mics overhead are. But Junior was face up. So you hear one and then you immediately hear the other. And that was when the referee stopped it. So there might be some merit to what you were saying, that Walter was the one that started off the sequence. But again, Junior did answer back. And if the referee wants to go that route, he's not wrong either. It's a shitty situation all around. But it's kind of one of those things where it's like the ref is not 100% to blame. I'll be a little bit of an apologist. You can say that. I'll take that criticism, but I kind of have to be.
I think very warranted by Junior to be upset. That only makes, normally we see people get mad at the ref, like, or, get upset at the ref, or, put blame on the ref. It's like Junior did not say anything to the ref. It was 100% on Walter. I'm walking right over to him in his corner. I'm gonna tell him right to his face that he's a bitch. I'm gonna slap him. Walter, first off, punk, because Junior was telling him, meet me on the parking lot, and Walter knows because Johnny Walker has been kicked out of this arena or any other arena plenty of times. He knows that they don't go to the fucking crowd. Walter Walker could go get his ass whooping in the parking lot if he wanted to, but no, he's a dirty fucking rat, and that was a dirty move by him if that's what happened. So that's just all
I,
I'm going with.
Look, don't take my word for it, everybody. Go out there and watch it yourself. As I said, the clip is out there on ESPN's YouTube page, so you can assess it yourself. I've watched it back in slow mo. I've watched it at full speed. I really tried to dig down into this assessment here to be as accurate as possible. But I could, I'm as fallible as anybody else. It could have been something else, but that was my assessment of it. And if so, I would say that it's slightly dirty for sure. But at the same time, he couldn't have anticipated that Junior was going to respond. I mean, there's a lot of fact. That's what it's such a weird situation in total. There's really like no one defining thing that because you're saying, the referee is generally the one that's going to get the flack from everybody. I was actually kind of happy that no one really seemed to be, giving it to the referee, and with good reason. As I said, Jason Herzog did it better in PFL. I think that it was slightly premature just because Herzog warned the fighter, saying, "Hey, if you cry out, that could be considered a verbal tap." He did a lot, more succinctly in the middle of a fight, but he could have said "Hey, don't cry out." You know what I mean? Something like that. There probably, is some argument there, but I don't think that the referee was wrong. I don't even necessarily think that Walter was all that wrong either, because he couldn't have made him cry back. It was just, the whole thing is very strange and unfortunate. I think at the end of the day is really how it shakes out.
I want to make a point, and this is just because, so what if somebody cries out? Why is this in the rule book? We're in a sport where the job is to hurt people. We're human beings here. We're not robots. If somebody says "ow," come on now, he ain't tapping.
So no, okay. So with that, I do have to agree with the rule, and it's for this reason. It's to protect people who are too tough for their own good, because there are a lot of times where guys will stay in a submission longer than they should and have their arms broken, have some serious long-term damage done just because they won't tap. They won't, either they can't tap with their actual hand or they won't verbally tap. And then a lot of permanent damage can be done. So they take it to say, if you're hearing them crying out, that's a sign that there is significant damage being done. You should stop it for their own safety. So I do think that there is some merit to that. I guess, you can kind of debate that as to, if we're talking more savage among us might say, hey, fuck that. Let them break their arms if they're in that position and don't want to tap. I guess I can see a little bit of merit to that as well. But just from a fighter safety standpoint, I do agree with it. But that at least is the reason why.
Yeah. So my final thoughts on this one: Walter Walker, you're 12-1, but that was a dirty play, man. You didn't really show me much. All you did was wrestle a dude who, going into the fight, everybody said the Tafas have nothing off their back. And to be fair, Junior Tafa did really well going up until that point. He actually, once he got to the mat, he crawled to the cage. He was standing up. He may have got back down, and he was defending the heel hook correctly. So 5-3 is unfortunate because he is good, and he has some signs to him. Ex-glory kickboxer. The wrestling's never gonna be elite, but he at least showed that he's got something that he can do.
For sure.
Got fucked over.
Yeah, 12-1 and still a bum. No, I'm just kidding. That's a little harsh, but I think that the criticisms that we had of Walter coming into this fight do still stand to an extent. I mean, he's not super fast. The ground game, I guess, is there to a little bit of an extent because he was able to roll through, take him down again. I'm not seeing any necessarily standout elements to Walter's game based on that performance, at least, and the last fight that give me any kind of heavy encouragement to be backing him towards the future. My perception of him did not change based on this fight. But yeah, I think that maybe Junior showed a little bit more on the ground than he has in the past. I do think that the criticism kind of stays with him as well. That, you know, it's what we say about the big Polynesian guys. You get them down and they stay down. At least he was able to roll through. It's like you said, he did get back to his feet at one point. He got himself to the cage. I think that just the way that this whole thing shook out, it's unfortunate because it doesn't move the needle for either guy in a significant way when it ends like that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so really, just unfortunate is the theme of that fight. And yeah, as I said, go and watch that finish yourself and draw your own conclusions. But you will definitely hear two audible cries, so that's at least something you can take away from the assessment in this podcast. All right, moving on to a much more impressive performance. This is Li Jinliang versus Carlos Prates. Man, the Leech getting knocked out for the first time by the Muay Thai master over here. What are you thinking?
Well, I went into this fight and I've never seen Lee, perform. So I'm thinking, okay, the Leech, he's got to be like a lead at wrestling, right? He's got to be a grappler. You can't get him off you. But as this fight progressed, what the general consensus in the Discord is that Lee is called the Leech because he sucks. And it was not fucking fun to watch this dude just not put his hands up. He kept doing this weird stuff where he would get hit, circle, and then back off to the cage. Like, he was doing it from so far out. Like, I know people do that just to, collect their bearings where they're at, but he was like getting punched. Okay, dive back to the cage, make sure I know where I'm at, get punched in the face, get dropped to my knee, and he just wasn't doing anything. And another thing, I don't know if you noticed, there was oddly some beef here. I don't know what was going on. I know at the weigh-ins they were, forehead to forehead and they had to be broken up. I know Lee, I think I've seen him do that before with other people, but then they had the extra security in the ring when it was about to start. But then at the end of it, it seemed like they were pretty okay with each other. They earned their respect. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, fair. I did not see that in the lead up. So interesting that's a point in this one. I did not expect to hear that. Yeah, I mean, what you were saying though about the way that he was doing the circle out and staying at distance and stuff, like to do that against a guy like Prates, who has shown that he is dangerous both at distance and in close range, just seemed like an odd game plan. Like it just didn't it looked like to me that Lee just didn't do his homework on Prates and the Fighting Nerds, bro. I mean, to be perfectly honest, because this dude, I mean, like to not know how dangerous this guy is at all areas. I mean, like at all ranges. And to be fighting the way that he was trying to, to get in, get a couple and, get back out of there. Like the circle outs were not as effective. Prates moved so goddamn nicely. I mean, like he's just really slick overall, very much an outclassing by Carlos Prates, ultimately getting the finish in the second round. So it was unfortunate for the Leech. Not a great year for Leeches in general. Him and Damon Jackson. Both
back-to-back weeks, man.
Yo, for real, dude. This is not looking good for Leeches in the UFC right now. But yeah, I like Lee. He's had some really good performances in the past. I think he's gotten a little bit of a raw deal at times with the matchmaking, but this was one that where Prates is in his career and where Lee is in his career, like he probably should have won this fight if he was that dude still. And I think it's just a changing of the guard situation here. Prates is just that guy right now.
Before this fight, I'm sitting here questioning, when is going to be the fight that we overrate Carlos Prates? He's coming in on a streak, and he's doing his thing, but when is the day that, that doesn't work anymore or whatever? I know the Fighting Nerds are on a streak, but it can't last forever. Something's going to get thrown in, some wrench is going to get thrown in here, but and then I made the point also is he does have 6 losses. That ain't like the greatest record, 20-6. And then the Discord was like, well, Charles Oliveira was 19-6 and then went on an 11 fight, whatever, something like that. So maybe we're seeing this dude about to pop off for some more because he's really fucking good. He's got power, he's got size, he's got a weird build that helps him, with his kicks and his knees, and he's just able to strike from a long range, and he doesn't keep his hands very high either, but he also doesn't get hit very often. So it's really just a chef's kiss, altogether.
Very much so. And yeah, and we'll talk about it a little bit after we finish reviewing this card. But we could possibly see a loss for a fighting nerd next week with Caio Bahaio going up against Jared Cannonier. But we'll get to that when we get to it. As for Pratas right now, though, yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to be the fight that'll jump him up in competition. Lee, also one of these guys that's probably in danger of gatekeeper territory. And, I mean, I'd say that was certainly a fight that would lend itself to that assessment. So yeah, I mean, jump over him will probably get him a pretty decent opponent in his next fight, and we'll see if he can keep the streak alive. That's always kind of in the back of my head whenever I'm making my bets and my predictions in general, is like where these guys are versus where the other guy is. So it's like you end up coming in on such a hot streak that somebody's going to be hungry to end that. Somebody also, if they're in jeopardy of backsliding heavily in their career, could want it a little bit more. I just don't see that Pratas not being one of these guys that's going to go out there and give it his full 100, at least as of right now. I mean, for a dude that smokes a pack a day, he's coming out there fucking smoking his opponents right now. So, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of ridiculous.
That was gonna be my point. Is like I'm wondering when that is gonna bite him in the ass. Like when are we gonna see him get taken to a 5-round decision and he's hawking up like phlegm, like in the middle of the fucking ring, like so. It is interesting, but he is really fucking good, and I enjoy watching him. So
Same.
keep taking these fights, fighting nerds. Keep being active. Do your thing, Sean Silva. I'm sure I'll see you in 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these fighting nerds, man, we talk about it every week, but it's just they are the team to watch right now. Always be having your eyes on anytime a fighting nerd is fighting. And one other thing just to mention before we move on from this fight is that it was nice to see that Pratas has the power in the hands as well. You know what I mean? Like, because we're seeing kind of a good mixture of finishing sequences from him. And when you're that well rounded, you're a hard guy to put away yourself. You're keeping your opponents on their toes. You're giving them too much to think about, and your output is too great in all different aspects that you become quite a threat. So I'm really excited to see where this guy goes. He's definitely on my to watch list for sure. He's high on that list right now.
Actually, that's a good point. I got to update my watch this list and get some people who really aren't like fighting as active anymore. Like, and then we'll get some other people on there like Carlos Paredes and Caio for sure, I guess.
Yeah, so there you go. Make sure that you tune into Chase's next stream. He'll have his updated list for you. You can go and give him shit about that.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to Tai Tuivasa versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Yeah, I mean, I think that I kind of called this one somewhat correctly, that just Jairzinho Rozenstruik was just the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. It's basically how I saw it.
Yeah, North said at the beginning of the week, he was like, this is the easiest one of the night. Rozenstruik is just going to style on him for 3 rounds. And that's exactly what happened. I'm glad I listened. But that's not even important, because this fight, we know that there was just one-sided as ever. How the fuck does this judge give a 30-27 to
brother, what the fuck was that?
Not only does he give that bad one, but he gives such a bad scorecard that they remove you from judging again.
Yeah, that was definitely going to be my point. And shout out to the Australian Commission for doing the right thing on that, because good Lord, I mean, if you watched that fight, how any human being with a pair of eyes, Vince King made a good point. He was like, maybe he wrote the wrong name on the, on the card at the end. I was like, that actually, based on that might not be too far off to have a 30-27 on one side and a 30-27 on the other side is fucking nuts, especially if you saw that fight. Yeah, so again, shout out to the Australian Commission for doing the right thing by getting that guy out of there, because that is just entirely unacceptable. And, I mean, Rozenstruik, luckily, the other judges saw it the correct way, but that could have been a really, really, really bad robbery. And sadly, it would have been one that Tai really needs. I mean, this is, I believe, 5 fights in a row that he has lost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, dude, what I had said on the watch along is, You ain't Tony Ferguson, homie. I mean, you're a fan favorite, but you don't have the legendary status. You don't have the legacy that Ferguson had. You start getting into anything over this, they're only keeping you around right now because you're a fan favorite. You gotta win your next fight, bro. I mean, if they haven't cut him already, which I don't think that they're going to because he is a fan favorite, but if you don't win your next fight, bro, you are. I mean, PFL is calling your name, bro.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying bare knuckle too would be a good one for Ty.
I could see that.
Um, but yeah, you're right. I mean, five is more than a lot of people get. So
Way
the fact
more.
that you come in here and not even just like five decisions or a couple decisions, like you're getting finished in a couple of these, like
Yeah.
subs and knockouts. And oh, I wanted to make a point. I don't know if you knew this, but they had the banner in the before the fight. And I remember seeing the clip, in their highlights for Ty is one of two heavyweights with a flying knee knockout finish.
I did not know
And
that. Interesting.
the funny thing is the other one is Derek fucking Lewis. So,
Goddamn right it
uh,
is.
so two of the people that are not even nimble at all have the flying knee knockouts, and that's just pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's
Shout
kind
out
of
to them.
wild. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it really does just go back to the fact that, I mean, like, Ty needs to figure something out and figure it out quick because
It's
Rosenstruck.
retirement.
I mean, and it's crazy to even think that he's not an old guy. I mean, we're not talking about end of the career time right now, but I mean, you're creeping up in that territory just by the amount of losses that you have. And what I wanted to say too is that Rosenstrike, he is technically proficient. He did what he needed to do, but it wasn't a knockdown, drag out. It's completely one sided in the sense. I mean, it was one sided, but it wasn't one sided in the sense that it was like, man, he's just wrecking this guy. It was just a nice technical. It almost reminds me of the Casey O'Neill fight in the sense it was just consistent output with better accuracy and better defense. That it's fundamentals. I've said that time and time again, especially about Tai Tuivasa, but it goes for a lot of the bigger Polynesian guys, is that they just don't have the fundamentals, and it's an unfortunate thing. Like, they could be so much better if they just drilled the basics of the sport a little bit harder. It just doesn't seem like they do. And so you got like a guy like Rosenstrike, who's just a technically proficient guy. Rosenstrike has been knocked out. I mean, like, he's lost plenty of fights at this point. People, because I remember when he was being considered as, oh, this could be the guy to watch. This could be somebody who's on the come up. This could be a champ. But we're talking a while back at this point. But I remember that time, and that hype train, however big or small it may have been, that got derailed. So it's not like you're talking about a guy who is an insurmountable challenge. It's just the fundamentals, and he beat him with the fundamentals.
Yeah, no, for sure. This was really just a one-sided affair, very technical masterclass from Rosenstrike. Ty just had no answers for, unfortunately, what was like a very easy game plan from Rosenstrike. It was just stand in front of him, back up, take a step to the side. Like, he didn't really do much evasiveness. He just popped him with the simple combinations, leg kicks, kept it real by the books.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it kind of speaks to the striking numbers, tell that tale. I mean, what, triple the amount almost,
Yeah.
of significant strikes landed. I mean, that's not great, or at least double, just under
Yeah.
double. So,
And
yeah,
well, and so another point that I made before this one is like Rosenstrike just doesn't seem like has power at all. Like, he's a very pitter patter, like very sparring kind of puncher. And it is heavyweight, so maybe we'll see him get a knockout someday. But I still don't see like his technical his striking is very technical, and it reminds me of like Sergey, but Sergey has like bombs he can drop.
right.
Rosenstrike is just very technical, straight down the middle. It's not gonna knock you out, but it's gonna win the striking battle.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just like I said, fundamentals is just the name of the game when it comes to that fight and Rosenstrike style in general. So yeah, I mean, you can call him a point fighter or whatever. The points added up in his favor in this one, except on one judge's card, but we talked about that already.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, craziness as to how. I mean, that guy needs to be investigated for real. As far as I mean, like, I don't think he'll ever judge again. But how he got to that position in the first place is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
All right, so we are coming into the main stretch here. Mateusz Gamrot versus Dan Hooker. This was an interesting fight. This was a kind of crazy one. This was probably maybe fight of the night-ish, I would say.
I want to ask first. Well, so there's two sides to this. Who do you believe won? And then who do you think the judges, or well, I mean, obviously the judges picked this, but in the middle of the fight, before you figured out the judges scoring, who did you think the judges should have gave it to? Because I feel like there's two sides to it. Normally when I'm watching, like if I'm going to be the devil's advocate, if everybody's on Dan Hooker's side, the whole Discord's going for it, I got to be on the side of the judges. Like, what are the judges going to see for Gamrot? Like, and during this fight, I really think Gamrot should have won. I mean,
Same.
it first off, okay, so they always talk about damage and like this and that is like, okay, so first let me address one thing. They talk about damage. Okay, Dan Hooker was busted up, getting beat on, bloodied to hell. So the damage, in my opinion, went to Gamrot. They want to talk about how Dan Hooker was landing more effective strikes. It's like, well, that's not, I mean, we're talking about damage. Like you're watching the bloody dude beat up the dude who's not, he may have dropped to a knee, nothing official, whatever. But another point that I want to make is like they always talk about in the Discord, like you can't give somebody a round for just what they do, like for a majority of the round. And I'm like, you're watching Dan Hooker only have 30 seconds of like success after Gamrot destroys him for 4 minutes of the round. Like I I don't know why they would like I get, a knockdown or like one crazy flurry. Yes, you can steal the round. But like from my knowledge, when I watch the fights, if you are leading in every category, striking, wrestling, control time, takedowns, whatever you want to say, I don't see how you lose the fight. Like it doesn't make sense in my opinion throughout the entire fight, especially after watching it and like keeping track of like, oh yeah, Cameron is kind of going to win this one. So I really don't get it. Third round, definitely to Hooker. But now the first and second, I think Cameron won.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% on this one. So when we were watching on the watch along, Vitz King was making the argument for Dan Hooker, and Vitz King when he's got an idea about how a fight's going, he's pretty steadfast in his resolve with that. So I was listening to what he was saying about it, and I was going kind of like based off of what he was saying, like what my counter arguments were towards that. And I think that, at least in the way that I was looking at it, that the counter arguments kind of won in my mind. I mean, like he was gonna, he's gonna think what he wants to think regardless. But like based on how we were talking it through, I was like, well, Gamrot had that, in the first round, he almost had Dan out of there at one point. I mean, that was pretty decisive. And then, second round, I mean, like I'd say he was doing the more effective work. The down to the knee situation does come into play. I think that's really the thing of this fight, is that there was a lot of elements to consider as to what went into the decision. At the end of it, I had Gamrot winning. I thought that they were. I wasn't going to be surprised that they gave it to Dan necessarily, just because he was doing a hell of a lot. That's why this fight was as close as it was, even though the numbers don't necessarily reflect that. Like Dan was putting everything on the line. He's a full heart kind of fighter, very entertaining to watch, and I like him a lot as a fighter. I mean, I enjoy watching him fight, but I just thought that Mateusz Gamrot was just cleaner throughout most of that fight. So yeah, I had him winning the fight. I don't necessarily agree with the decision. Whether or not it's hometown bias, I mean, I gotta not believe that, only because of what we've seen earlier in the card. I mean, like, there's been other fighters who haven't gotten the decision based on, Josh Kulabau. We were just talking about that. I mean, there could have been some swaying there had there been hometown bias. So I mean, I got to believe that that's not the case, but I do wonder what the rationale was for giving it to Dan, only because I do think that Gamrot was doing the better work just throughout the entire fight. I mean, even in that third round, which was still close.
And I just want to make a point that I love Dan Hooker. I love watching him fight. This makes me very happy that he won. I was unfortunately thinking Gamrot won, which meant I had to watch him in the top contender spots, But Dan Hooker being at the top, I don't think there's much for him there because he's already lost to the champ. I mean, what are you going to go fight Islam again? Yeah, sure, but I'll go for it. But no, I don't. I think he's just fun fights in the top five. Like that's probably, in my opinion, business wise, you give him the split decision here. It's not too crazy fraudulent, but it also gives us so many fun fights in the future for him.
Yeah, I think that that's basically the shakeout of all of it is just that, because the name that I've heard people floating is him versus Justin Gaethje. Obviously,
Charles
that's
Oliveira.
that. I mean, you've got exciting fights down the pike for that. But that's all. That really is all that it is. It's like a non BMF fight. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But one thing I do want to mention, though, based on all of what we've been saying here, is that I think that Gamrot gets a little bit of a bad rep. I understand the criticisms. He's had boring performances in the past. He can be very control heavy and things like that. But when he was put under fire by a guy like Dan Hooker, who's going to, give him a lot of opposition, I thought he looked pretty good. So, I mean, like, it wasn't like it was, completely, like a fucking Umar Nurmagomedov situation. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a great fighter who just gets controlled and wet blanketed. I mean, I like Gamrot. I don't know. I don't think I think he gets a little bit of a bad rep.
I think this fight I turned around on Gamera because like before here it's like yeah, he's boring. I don't really want to see the wrestler too much. But like now, I mean, unfortunately that I think he kind of got robbed here. That I am excited to see what he comes back with. And I had this slight comparison that I want to bring up is like a Gamera is kind of like a less aggressive Colby Covington. Like that's his game and like that's what he can do. Very limited stand up. Wrestling looks really good, but he's not really doing much with it. Especially when he gets to these higher competitions. Like with RDA, that was just a wrestling match like the entire time. And then this one, it's like Dan Hooker, you could have not had the split decision. You could have finished him if you were some elite grappler. Like you're just a wrestler, not really a submission guy. So
Yeah.
it's hard.
I would say that Gamrot is probably a little bit more powerful than Colby, just off of
Well,
maybe a little bit. I think so.
I made the point is like this is the first Polish dude that I've seen that doesn't have the Polish power. Like I really don't. He just doesn't like look like he can just knock people out when he throw punches. Like it's just not. I don't know. He's just not the most technical. It just doesn't look very pretty when he does it either. And obviously, there's a dude later that doesn't throw pretty punches that can knock people. But I don't see it from Gamrot on the striking.
Yeah, fair. I don't know. I guess I'll have to go to reassess a little bit. I'm gonna go back and watch some of his fights and get a better picture of what I'm thinking of
But
him. But
24-3. So like
yeah,
it does show like he's not this one loss here. You lose to Dan Hooker. That's a name that people will respect you losing to, kind of deal looking back. So you can
well,
still build your way back to the top here.
yeah, and that's something I wanted to say too, is that I hope that this loss does not backslide him in a significant way because it was so close. Whether or not you believe that he won the fight or not doesn't really matter at this point. The record stands as it will. I don't think that he deserves like a major backslide over it. I hope that if he's going to have a trajectory that is leading him towards higher things, that he can get that back maybe within a fight or two. And then, because really, that's, the shakeout of all of this fight. It's like exactly what you said. It's not like Dan Hooker is going to be going in there on some kind of crazy run, although some people are trying to say that that's the case now. And I'm like, I don't, Jesus Christ, did you really think so? Like, I think you're a little bit nuts if you think that. But, so yeah, so it's unfortunate for Gamrot because he was building on a pretty good momentum, even though some of those wins were rather weird and fluky. We know, the disqualifications and all this kind of stuff that had happened. I mean, he's got one of those weird stories that needs a course correction.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, this does not help that, but I do hope that he can get himself back on track because I do think he won that fight in reality. So, we'll see what ends up happening in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, just to finish that off, I do wonder what that fight is going to be with Dan Hooker now. Like, will it be Justin Gaethje? Will it be Charles Oliveira? I mean, is there another name that comes up that people are saying Dustin again? Right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
So there are options there, and we'll have to see what ends up happening. Hopefully, it'll be somebody entertaining because that would be entertaining to see him again.
I think Dustin's probably the most like I mean, right. Dustin, this is the most likely matchup to bring him out of retirement because he knows like, oh, I just get to go punch somebody. Like, and I've already punched this dude and beat him before. Like, it ain't nothing to me. If he comes back for anybody else, it's like, ooh, am I gonna have to like wrestle kind of deal? Like, am I gonna have to pull the gilly out again? Like, I just want to punch people. Like he
So
can
then,
come back if he's just punching people, you know.
sure. I mean, let's say that that is the fight. You put your money on Dustin.
Yeah, because Dan Hooker, I mean, he does seem to squeeze by, and I do love Dan Hooker. Don't get me wrong, he's a fucking animal, but it's not gonna. You're not gonna keep skating by, I don't think, and especially if you get finished. Dustin didn't even look that bad against Islam, and he was slower, but you know who isn't? You know, we're getting old.
Yeah, and I mean, really, all three of those guys that we named, Poirier, Oliveira, or Gaethje. I mean, I think all three of them have a pretty good shot against him. So
Charles
well,
is
he's
a
the he is the wild
coin.
card. Yeah.
He's a coin toss right now, but yeah, we'll see. I mean,
All right.
could be fun.
Yep, indeed. All right, moving on to the co-main event here. Kai Kara France versus Steve Urseg. People are saying that this was the fraud check on Steve Urseg. Man, I hate to be in that camp, but bro, Kai Kara fucking France coming out getting a bomb knockout.
I want to make a point, you know, and I have been saying like Steve Urseg is championship level. Like he did go to split decision, maybe arguably win with Pantoja. But I want to make the point that who is decisively gonna like, you know, okay, so Pantoja in his fights, I even remember I was watching the clips when I was making the year looking back video. I remember Roy Val was piecing Pantoja up until he got subbed. And you know, maybe Pantoja is not the one who comes out here and decisively gets a win, but he does pull it out at the end. And maybe that's not anything on Pantoja, but the skill levels are just not that far apart. So when you have Kai Kara France, who's counted out, he's somebody who is towards the top and he's been out for a little bit. And then you get somebody who people think is the fucking god killer, or you know, he should be champ right now. And then, you know, you start to think about how little the levels are between all these people because the 25ers, man, they're all can do so much. Like they're just all well-rounded. Like they can't have one specific thing that they do, which maybe Kyle France can only do one thing, which is strike, but it works in this case because he can drop bombs at 25. Like, oh my god, he made Steve Ursek die. And I like Steve Ursek has the face of somebody who, when he gets knocked out, it's like I see that guy getting knocked out, but like,
Yeah.
golly, man, I just hated to see it actually.
Yeah. So same. In this fight, I had predicted Kai coming out a little bit faster than he did. I was somewhat surprised that he was a little bit more methodical than I had expected, but I was in the end very glad that he was. He even said himself in the post fight that he had to be smart. He knew how skilled Urseg is. I think that he really put together a very solid game plan because what I had noticed about Kai in the past is that I call him one of those fast twitch fighters. He's very jittery is not the right word, but it comes off as jittery in the sense that he's constantly doing those short movements. It's those very
Yeah.
like fast shifting movements. Like always off center. Kind of a lot of circly movements, stuff like that. He was very composed in this fight, and I think that it played well into his strengths because once he saw his opening, he was able to capitalize on it in a fight-ending way. So, good on him for calming himself down a little bit and getting himself into a position that he needed to be in to make all of that happen. Yeah, Urseg, you're so right about the flyweights, man. I mean, it's such a competitive division, and when you're starting to talk about guys with knockout power versus guys who are extremely high level wrestlers, it just becomes this conversation of like what skill is going to be able to win at what time. And I mean, the difference between these guys skill wise is so minuscule. It just depends on what skill they have as their dominant one. So, I mean, it's really unfortunate for Urseg because he does, he does drop pretty significantly off of that after bumping up even in loss after the title run. I mean, the title challenge there. It does suck, but Kai Kara France coming back and showing that he shouldn't have been counted out in the first place. I think that is a real wake-up call to a lot of people that were saying Kai's washed. He's not championship level. I mean, you can't count him out of the conversation now, can you?
And so with Kai, this fight, I feel like I saw more of the new Figgy in this fight, how he's very calculated, calm. He knows that this right here will work. I just got to land it. And I know I just gotta wait for my moment for it to shine. And Kai, like you said, he came out very, very calculated on what he wanted to do. He knew once he caught Steve, I mean, it was lights over. So I feel bad too, because Steve, again, back to his face. Like after you see him wake up, of course, because he was unconscious, the look on his face, like, I was so close to being champion. Now I'm losing by knockout. Now I'm just going down, 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 down the ranks. Like I was so close. And like I hate to see that on his face, because he does just looks like a dude that you feel bad for, but it's the fight game. So
Indeed. And yeah, I mean, that it's we talk about this a lot where it's like the method and means of defeat really does inform how the rankings shake out. And I I mean, if he stays top 10, I'd be somewhat surprised. I mean, he might be able to drop to maybe 10 and stay in the top 10 that way, but I mean, top 15 still, sure, but this is going to be a long road to rebuilding the momentum that he had after that title fight. Because I mean, the fact that he even got that in the first place was kind of crazy to a lot of people. He showed out really nicely in that fight, even in defeat. So everybody kind of thought that this was like, okay, I mean, if he couldn't do it then, give him a couple more fights, let him get another shot at it. That's going to be a lot harder to make happen now. So it does suck. I think he's one of those guys that, like you said, you kind of want to root for him. He's sort of a kind of a meek, everyman sort of looking dude, at least, but he's got knockout power himself. We've seen it happen. So, it's not like he needs to be like completely out altogether, but that just makes it a lot more difficult for him to get back into any kind of conversation.
100%.
Yeah. So I mean, good on Kai though. Again, now so we've got Tatsuro Taira fighting for the eliminator, right?
Yep.
That's versus Royval, right? Am I right about that? Or yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, if Royval wins that fight, we're gonna get a third with Pantoja. That's kind of crazy too. I mean, does Kai jump
And we
the
know how
line?
that's going to go, even though Royval was winning the first one, in my opinion, up until he got choked out. But
So, but do you think that Kai jumps the line if that fight turns out to be boring or for what any number of factors?
um, during the fight, I remember thinking, like, we were supposed to get Kai and Manel. I'm still waiting for that to happen someday. I know Manel's coming off an L, but like, Makayev's not coming back. So I
Well,
mean, got to figure out something.
and that's a good point too. We're just talking about like the method and means of defeat informing how you view a fighter. I mean, a lot of people thought the Manel Cop won that fight. So I mean,
True.
or at least it was very, very, very close, and then everything happened with Makayev. So I mean, there's multiple ways you can look at it that weren't necessarily terrible for Manel Cop. Yeah, I don't see that as a bad thing if they want to do it, but optically, I guess it really depends on if they want to make that leap of giving him a higher level guy after a loss on paper. So yeah, it'd be interesting if that does end up happening. I would like to see that fight. And I mean, if Kai Kara France has figured it all out, if he's starting to really come into his own with the way that he's fighting, with his methodology in the fights, then there's no reason that he couldn't do that to Manel Cop too. I think that Manel Cop would be a lot more grapple heavy and probably put a lot more pressure on him than Ursag was, because he wasn't doing that. But just, I mean, realize that that's the game plan coming in and plan for it. I don't see why Kai couldn't make that happen.
No, 100%.
So yeah, we'll see what happens there. But great victory for Kai. Good job getting back in everybody's good graces. And finally, on this very, very impressive card, we had Israel Adesanya taking on the champion Dricus du Plessis, getting submitted for the first time in his mixed martial arts career. What'd you think of the fight?
There were so many good memes about this fight. And I will say that we talked about how the lack of the hype for this, fight was for the longest time kind of deal. And we actually did, since I'll bring it up, we did have a little bit of an argument on the Discord too, because we were sitting here watching and then we're like, why are they showing Habib and Connor? Why are they showing Jones and DC? And then they show Dricus and Izzy. And I'm like, these aren't like greatest rivalry type thing, like greatest
Right.
rivalries, and then Dricus and DDP, like, and it's like the one clip of Izzy just in the ring being drunk, and it's like, and then I'm over here just pointing it out. I'm like, yo, this is not even close. Like, why you wanted to bring these two or whatever to compare, and then Discord just went off, blah 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 blah. Anyway, the hype was not here coming for it, but the fucking fight delivered, and it was really really fucking good. Drekus was doing his whole shtick where he doesn't know what he's doing, even though he's doing it. And then Izzy actually had some good moments where I was thinking like, oh wow, like he might start getting it together. Drekus does look like he's tired, always does, but maybe he is. And there was so many, one, funny moments, two, ridiculous moments, and then three, a godly moment at the end. Which another great meme happened at the end where it was like Drekus didn't even have like his legs like locked for like the choke. Like he just threw in the hooks and just fucking did it. And it's like whatever, man. Like he just does what he wants. He's a true Chad. I really respect this dude. Like I got my South African flag on the way, so shout out Drekus.
Nice, very good. Yeah. So yeah, to touch on all of that, this is absolutely not a top level rivalry in the sport, and the fact that they were so respectful afterwards was also, it was great to see, but also kind of memeable. The amount of hugging that they were doing, it was a little bit
Yeah.
much, but fair play to them. I was glad to see that after all of the ridiculousness. I'm gonna go into that in the Emma episode that'll be coming out in a couple of days here about that. But yeah, exactly, Jack, and kissing. So that all aside, that was a conversation that was going on in the chat during the watch along. Is this a top tier rivalry? No, definitely not. But as you said, I mean, Drekus just, I don't know another guy. I mean, like, I'm sure I could probably figure one out if I thought long enough about it. But like, it's
No, it's
hard to think.
Pantoja.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
I
the
guess
same
Pantoja.
people.
Yeah, it is kind of similar to Pantoja, but that's just more in that. The reason I don't say it's a 1-to-1 is because that's more in just the body language and the facial expressions with the being tired look. But at least Pantoja can get super technical when he turns it up. You know what I mean? Like when it's time to lock in, Pantoja really locks in. Drekus, I don't know another guy that fights just like a drunken sailor, but like the best drunken sailor that you've ever seen in your life. I mean,
Yeah, I was like, fuck. Another one was like, I don't know what Driekus be doing out there, and it really don't look like he does either. And so like, and another one that I thought was really funny is I thought of this one is not even a joke, but like Driekus is really just a barroom brawler who happened to train mixed martial arts for like his whole fucking life. Like it really is the sad fucking reality. Is like this dude is just gonna do dumb shit. Like if there was a chair or a stool, he would be hitting you with it in that ring. Like he's a beast and he just does what he wants. He can do whatever he wants, and obviously nobody's stopping him right now. So shout out
yeah,
him. What is that? Two title defenses
that
or
is,
one?
yeah. Yeah, no, it's a
No,
two. No, yeah, it
no
is. It's
one, no one.
one
Yeah,
defense, and the win over Strickland. But that being said, I think that one thing that Drekus does really well within his drunken master style is he finds small openings very effectively. Like it doesn't look like it from the naked eye because you're seeing how he's moving his body, but he finds counters well. Like he finds just like it's very, it's those real, it comes down to the fine details when it comes to Drekus, and it's crazy to say that based on the style, but like he finds just these openings that he'll capitalize on in big ways, and I think just that looseness that he has in his style lends itself to getting those. It's counterintuitive. That's I think the best
yeah.
way to describe it. But it seems to work, and it works really effectively. That's like Jack's saying that he doesn't think he's going to hold the belt long. I don't know how you can necessarily think that based on the fact that it just works. Like I mean, like it's one of those things that doesn't have to make sense sometimes, and it can be a conundrum for all of us pundits out here, pontificating and theorizing on why it works or doesn't. But at the end of the day, if he gets those wins, he gets them, and he got one against one of the most dominant champions the sport has ever known. So
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, it works, and this is just what the fight game is. Not everything in this sport is the X's and O's. Like it really just comes down to some people have it and some people don't. Drika's his style lends him to be able to win a fight anyway. Like he can take you down and he'll sub you. He can just punch with you and he may scrape it out, but he's also going to wrestle with you. Like he just does everything so willingly. Like he's just willing to do anything in his fights. He doesn't do the same thing every time because he does have just such a weird wonky, he's just playing it by, he's just out there doing shit. Like he's just throwing shit at the wall and it'll work and he'll do it again or it won't and he'll try it a different way. Another thing that I thought was funny is Darren Till like tweeted at Izzy like a whole big message on like things to look out for with DDP and how to like beat him, and they both got subbed the exact same way with the fucking headbutt. Like,
yeah, well, Darren Till does not need to be commenting on high-level mixed martial arts in any
yep.
capacity at this point. But so yeah, one thing also that I wanted to mention too is that when it comes to those small openings that I was talking about, I think that so I was listening to ITP MMA. Shout out to that guy; he's really talented. His assessment was that the reason that Dricus had such a close fight with Sean is because Sean didn't allow for as many of those small openings. Basically, that's a paraphrasing, of course, but that's essentially what his argument was. And I would argue that the Sean style proves the point better because it was so the openings were so much smaller. You know, Sean was being extremely defensive, you know, as he is shelling up. You know, we know all the details about how Sean Strickland fights his high level fights. Dricus was able to still capitalize where there were openings in that fight. So when you have somebody like Izzy, who's a little bit more rangy, he's wider open. You know, I mean, there's a different methodology to the way that Israel Adesanya approaches a fight. I think that was why he was able to be more effective in this fight than he might have been against Sean Strickland, is because when he capitalizes on those small openings, there were more of them to be had against Israel Adesanya, who, you know, Jack is saying that, and he said this on the watch along too, that he's thinking that Izzy was looking slow. I mean, like, look, maybe I need to get my eyes checked. That certainly could be the case, but it looked to me like a pretty vintage Izzy performance earlier on. I was like, oh, this guy might still have it. You know, I mean, like, I thought that he was looking pretty fresh in some of those earlier rounds, or at least towards the maybe second and third.
Yeah, I was gonna say he started to look a little better. It looked like, a little ring rust, that he was slow the first round. And it was, and then there was times where he was putting stuff together. Like I said at the beginning, like I was thinking like, oh, he might be able to, put something together. And he does surprisingly knock people out sometimes. Like, who knows? But Dricus is just a true Chad. Like I really can't express like how, like, okay, so the height difference was also something to note in this one. Like Izzy is so much taller than Dricus. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the height, the reach, how you fucking play it. Dricus will find a way. He just really wants to be the UFC champion. And I respect that he does take this with a lot of pride. Like he is the middleweight champ right now. And like he stands on that shit.
Yeah, well, and I had certainly mentioned that a couple of times in some of these past streams, saying that, you know, Dricus has a champion's mindset that I think really works well for him. He's just got a very definitive outlook on how he views himself and the sport, and I think that really carries him. His mental game is extremely strong. Also, one of the reasons why he is such an absolutely biting trash talker. He has now made 2 grown men cry in press conferences.
Yeah.
So you know, in or out, you know what I'm saying. I think that he's just a very well put together individual in general. He's the confidence level, you know, like you said, true Chad. It really does, you know, it's a meme, but it really does apply to him. I mean, like he's untouchable mentally, and it carries throughout everything that he does, and certainly shines through in his fights as well. One other thing to mention, though, based on what Jack's throwing in the chat there too, is that I do think that you're correct that the creativity has waned in Israel Adesanya for sure. But I would say that Izzy, knowing the talent level that Dricus has with the crazy style that he has, you're putting, you know, 4 or 5 layers onto this thing to get to the end conclusion. I think Izzy probably was a little bit more cautious in this fight than he might have been against somebody who he wasn't taking as seriously. And, you know, I think that it's also valuable to note that Izzy has gotten some wins over very high level guys with very little output in those fights, and that also might color his vision as to how he approaches fights later on down the line in his career. It's never good to have like guys who are not going to be giving you back a whole hell of a lot, because then you can fall into the trap of becoming a little complacent with what you're good at. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, but I mean, all in all, this was a really good fight to end a really good card. The round 4 sub, I know I had it on round 2 sub and verdict, so I got a shitload of points for this one. But man, it was a really good one. Izzy pointing to the floor. Another, oh my God, a great tweet. Oh my gosh. Izzy pointing to the floor and telling
Yeah.
Dreekus, I want to be subbed right here. And 17 seconds later. So it
That's
was,
fucking funny.
yeah, it was really bad. I don't know what was going on. I actually remember saying the canvas was slick earlier in some fights, that people were just slipping all over the place. Izzy was tripping all over the place at the end of that sequence and then fell, and then Dricus synced in that choke. Man, we talk about his grappling, we don't get to see it, his sub skills. And here he is. He just sinks that in really quick, and Izzy had no fucking answer for it. He looked bad too.
Yeah, it
He was cooked.
Yeah, when that thing was in, it was all over. I mean, there was no, we've talked a good amount about how guys are getting so much better with defending the rear nakeds lately. Like, you're seeing that more and more. The hand defense is becoming a lot more strong. In
Josh
some,
earlier on the card.
say Josh, Dan to an extent there a little bit. I mean, like, there has been an improvement pretty much across the board. That's kind of like the new meta, is to have better hand defense when it comes to the rear nakeds. And yeah, Izzy just not having any of that. So, good on Dricus for recognizing the opening. That's yet another, speaking towards what I was saying earlier about finding those small openings, because, a guy who is not as keen to those small motions as Dricus was might not have gone in for that as quickly as he did. But really, when he saw that was open, it was one of those really, really quick ones. I mean, like, he made the decision definitively. We talk about having a game plan to the finish. It's like, you see that opening, I'm going for it. He went for it. He got it. So, I mean, like, it really was a very nice fight IQ situation on his part as well. So, yeah, just a really nice performance. What can Dricus not do? I mean, I guess we're gonna have to see what the deal is going forward. I guess they're probably gonna give him Sean again, right? That's the common
That's what
narrative
I
here?
wondered. Yep, Dana said Sean is next. He's the number 1 ranked, middleweight. So
Yeah. So I don't know if I don't think the rankings have been updated yet, but we'll take a look here in just a second. But yeah, I mean,
I mean,
that's
there ain't much to update. I mean, Izzy's been 2. I mean, what's he gonna drop past Rob Whitaker? I mean,
yeah. Well, and then I guess Rob versus Hamzat's coming up, so we're gonna have to
yeah.
see
So
what happens with all that.
the one that is very interesting, um, is that Jared and Imavov are still 4 and 5. The
Let
fact
me
that
bring it up real
Jared's
quick
still
while we're talking
one
about it.
rank away from Imavov, it's kind of.
Yeah, so I mean, we have not gotten the updates yet. I wanted to check flyweight too to see what if that had changed, but of course they haven't gotten that yet. But that's going to be interesting how that all switches out. Also, by the
Yeah.
way, one thing to note is that Brendan Moreno says that he's coming out of retirement, so he'll be back in the game at some point. And then where the hell is Amir Albazi? By the way, I mean, like, we've I guess he's still injured after all this time.
Yeah, like that's kind of crazy.
I mean, he's just sitting on that number 3, till the end of time, it seems like. But anyway, that's all besides the point. They have not updated the rankings yet, but as you said, I mean, it's I mean, I guess Izzy does probably drop a rank, and then yeah, Mavov is just gonna. I mean, that's that you're starting to get into that weird territory at that point, where it's like, it's kind of still a mishmash of everybody, because the top of the division is so gridlocked. But after Rob versus Hamzat, we're going to definitely have to see how that shakes out, because that could be a big opening up of things here.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's too bad we didn't have Jack Hermanson on this card.
Yeah, Jack coming off of a win after, being out for a while, and lost before that. So I guess there's probably some potential there. Maybe, I mean, Brandon Allen, I think everybody's just kind of sleeping on him. Maybe not sleeping on him, but I think everybody just sort of has it in their head that he's not an elite fighter, when he's probably shown a little bit more than people are giving him credit for.
I guess we can also bring up that Vittori and Brendan Allen got into a scuffle outside of the whatever.
Yeah, over at the casino.
I actually didn't watch the video. What was it, fun or?
Nah, I mean, it was kind of weird. Like, everybody sort of made a circle around them. I guess they had been beefing for a second or something. They had maybe were having some heated words, and then yeah, Allen caught him with a nice one. Sent Vittori fallen backwards. So, 10-9 round for Allen in that one.
Nice.
But yeah, it wasn't much more than that. It was kind of just a single shot and a bunch of people kind of breaking him up. I think after that, but yeah,
Right.
something noteworthy, I suppose. Yeah, really, as always, we're just gonna have to wait and see what shakes out going forward. But as of right now, I mean, if we, going back to the initial point here as to what is next for Dricus, I mean, he's gonna take on Sean again. I don't necessarily think that that's gonna be any different. Personally, I don't see Sean making any major like changes to his style. The only thing I could see Sean doing differently would be to abandon the shell more often and be a little bit more aggressive. That could happen, but it's just not the way that he fights generally. So I'd have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, and shout out to Jack because in the moment I was like, all right, man, I've seen enough. Marvin Vittori, I guess you're up next to fight Dricus. We're just gonna see what happens with these two fucking weirdos.
Well, if fucking Khalil Roundtree can get a goddamn title shot, I guess that's something else to mention here. What the hell was that? Uh,
Yeah, that one's pretty crazy. Not only are you somebody who didn't deserve, but you did not just bust for PEDs, but literally just coming off the suspension for PEDs. Like, I don't know. That's some
and
pretty god tier shit.
Yeah, a PED bust and a notable win over Anthony Smith. That is the claim to fame currently of Khalil Roundtree. I can't wrap my head around that in the slightest. I am also not a huge fan of this new trend that seems to be happening where these guys from way lower down are getting these title shots. I think Steve Erceg was a little bit of an outlier because of the streak that he was on and also that it's flyweight. When you're talking about light heavyweight, I mean, like, that just doesn't fly to me, man. That's
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't abide by that. So it's just strange that this is where we're at with these fights. But anyway, back to the point. I mean, I guess that stranger things have happened. So if Marvin Vittori somehow ends up with a goddamn title shot off of it, then whatever.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, this card was really, really good, guys. I'm excited for
Yeah.
what's next.
And shout out to Mr. Rage Quit, by the way. Love you, brother. But yeah, no, great card. I was very happy with this card. I was very happy that the Australian fans got a good show there down in Perth in that huge ass fucking arena that they got. Quite enjoyed all of the festivities on this one. Fun card to be sure. And yeah, I mean, a couple of interesting things for these divisions. I mean, I think that Kai Kara France really thrown a wrench into, some of the conventional thinking at flyweight at the moment. Not that it was like so far out of left field that, it wouldn't have, that it was like crazy, but it is still pretty insane that he got the knockout in the way that he did. And if people were counting him out before, then he's right back in that conversation. So, a couple of good things on this card.
I agree. This one was definitely it was up there with 300 for this year.
You think so? I wouldn't go that far. I'd say that this was like maybe like a solid 7.5 or 8 out of 10.
I'm not talking about like the fight calibers necessarily, but enjoyment level. Like this one
Oh,
was
yeah.
definitely up there.
Well, when it comes to that, I'm easy to please. As long as people are punching each other
True.
in the face, I'm a happy guy.
True.
So that was that. Let's take a real quick look at next week. Of course, we've got the Contender Series coming up tomorrow night, brothers and sisters. You know that I will be along with the Vitz King on the watch along here on the Yama channel. I know my brother Chase is going to be watching as well. I think you said that you're not. Are you going to be streaming for the Contender Series? Or?
Yeah, I will stream it. It'll be after tough because I got to work until 9.
Ah, lame. All right. So you can watch it with us first and then go watch it with Chase afterwards. There you go. You got a 1-2 punch
There we
on that.
go.
The Island guys have to develop a better ground game. Yeah, Jack, we talked all about that for sure, brother. Check the VOD. I've been saying that for years and years. You know how I feel about that. But yeah, so the watch alongs for Tough and for the Contender Series. My favorite time of the year is Contender Series season, brother. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I'm so excited. That first week of the Contender Series was really great, so we will be back for that. And then on Saturday night, we've got Jared Cannonier versus Caio Borralho, another fight nerd, as we mentioned earlier. What do you think about this fight?
This fight specifically is really, really good.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Kaio's gonna get it done. I hate to see it for Jared because he got fucked over, and then now he's in a fight that he didn't even have to be in. Um, but I think Kaio's going to get this one done.
I agree, and I will say that based on exactly what you're saying, the fact that finish was wonky as fuck. That was certainly the worst Jason Herzog finish I've ever seen. That aside, it did set him back, just because of the nature of it being a loss. However, if there is anything left in Jared Cannonier, this is the fight that it needs to show. I mean, if there's, Jared was talking about wanting to make a run. He's challenged for the belt before. Things did not go his way. I'm a big fan of Jared Cannonier's style. I think that he's a very effective, strong, striker. I think he's got a lot to offer when it comes to his stand-up game. But Kaio is just that this is a generational fight. This is old versus new, really, when it comes to the changing of the guard. If Jared's got anything left in that tank, this has to be the fight to show it.
Yeah, he's gotta show that the fighting nerds are not invincible. I mean, if he's really gonna do something here, he's got to make it crazy because Kaio
Yeah.
can do it every way. He can do anything really.
It's true. And Jack's making a good point. I mean, Cannonier, I mean, I don't even think that he would necessarily go to gatekeeper status. I think he might just retire, honestly.
Yeah.
Either that or it's going to be like such a heavy drop that, yeah, I mean, gatekeeper might even be a little bit generous for it, in the sense that he might just start backsliding altogether, because keep in mind that as wonky as the finish was in that last fight, Imavov was doing some pretty decent work before it all went down. Bad stoppage still, but the work was still there.
Yeah.
So Jared, get the job done, brother. He's not even. I'm kind of surprised that he's not a bigger underdog. I mean, a plus 175 is. I mean, it's sizable, but it's not super crazy.
Right.
So this is your time to really show that you still got something left in there, brother. Make it happen. All right, further down we've got.
This is a crazy co-main event.
I kind of thought the same thing. I was like, I mean, I would have thought that actually fucking
The tough guys. Those tough guys right there. Ryan Loder and Robert Valentine. Fuck that. I mean, why? Might as well.
That, or I mean, either one of these fights, fucking Shabazian versus Mearshart or Magny versus Morales, are both better fights for a co-main, personally, in my opinion. But I guess maybe it's because both of them are slightly more tenured. Angela Hill's been around forever, so I don't know. Whatever. You
Definitely
don't need
not betting on her. I don't know how it's a coin flip.
I mean, the Angela Hill rule is obviously named after Angela Hill. When it comes to how I view certain fighters, I put her in that Anthony Smith category. I call it the Hill. And that's exactly why she is the most unpredictable fighter that you can possibly imagine as far as from a betting perspective goes. And the fact that this is a fucking pick'em right now, I think that speaks as loudly as it needs to speak. I'm staying as far fucking away from this fight betting wise as possible. Y'all can have that.
Yeah. And then so after that we got tough finalists.
Yeah.
Ryan
so
Loder
what are you thinking about Robert Valentine over here? I mean, dude, after those two, getting a knockout and a crazy submission. I mean, this guy is Ultimate Fighter material right here.
I think he comes in and gets a dub and wins the crowd over instantly. He's going to be on the map this Saturday. Like, he's going to come over and get it done because Ryan Loder's not that impressive. I mean, he's just like a, good old American wrestler kind of deal. Robert might pull something off and people are going to love him. I mean, that's really all it comes down to. He's a fan favorite already.
I was going to say, I mean, like if you're watching The Ultimate Fighter, it's kind of hard not to love the guy. He's just a great guy. B, his story is like heartwarming to an extent. He's one of these guys that I think a lot of people can empathize with, and he doesn't have a much of a family. He's single. I mean, there's elements that it's like you just kind of root for the guy. It's just like fighting is all that he's got to an extent. I mean, I hate to put it in those terms, but he kind of puts it in those terms himself. So yeah, it's hard not to love him. One question I do have though for you, Chase. Based on watching The Ultimate Fighter, do you think that Robert Valentine is going to corner himself?
Yeah, that would be crazy. No, bro, he is like what you were saying, just a good guy, good teammate. Like he was coaching his other guys, he was training with them, he was the dummy pad or whatever. Like Robert Valentine is really just the whole package. He would make any UFC team, whatever you want to say, very, very happy. And he's going to do some great things, especially at the weight that he's at. plenty of things are possible.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm joking. The fact that if you haven't been watching The Ultimate Fighter, Robert Valentine has been fighting and competing in the season and is also somehow a volunteer coach as well. And that just, like, everybody just went along with it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think that everybody's pretty hot on Valentine at the moment. I think that he's got a great potential to win that fight and become a fan favorite overnight, as Chase was saying. Moving on to Neil Magny versus Michael Morales. I mean, I got to believe that if Neil Magny is the gatekeeper that everybody claims that he is, that this is going to be a fucking huge come out party for Morales if anybody doesn't know him already, because this guy has been on such a hot streak. He's the new Ecuadorian to watch.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this one. Hopefully, we finally get to see Neil Magny put away. Like, I'm tired of seeing the judges actually, like, maybe consider that he could do something. I need him to be finished. Round one, you're a minus 850, Michael. You're 16-0. Just dog this dude, like, seriously.
I mean, yeah, a minus 850 speaks volumes, and it's absolutely well placed in Michael Morales. As I was saying, Cheeto, of course, is the Ecuadorian, of note. I have a good Ecuadorian friend that I work with who basically was telling me that back home in Ecuador, even if you're not a fight fan, Cheeto Vera, Ecuador is a smaller country. I would say that Michael Morales has the potential to overtake his star power in that country, and with good reason. This guy is so lethal, and I mean, 16-0 really tells the tale of that guy. Well deserved all of those wins. He should be finishing this fight in definitive fashion. I mean, he should be able to do what Ian Gary couldn't do.
Yeah, 100%.
So, all right, then we also have the other Ultimate Fighter finale fight. We're going to find out tomorrow who will be filling this slot here. I have a feeling it's going to be the Brazilian gentleman. I forget his name off the top of my head. I think is he a Santos? I think he might be. Yeah, I think that's at least what my gut's telling me off the bat, but don't quote me on that. We'll see what happens tomorrow. And of course, then we have Edmund Shabazian versus Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald a big underdog in this one. Edmund a big favorite. I will say Edmund has been really improving his game over the years. I think getting away from Tarverdian has been a good thing for him, as it is for any fighter. And Meerschaert is a dude who somehow can still win a fight even at his advanced age and crazy record. So it's going to be an interesting fight. I think this is going to be a little bit closer than people might think on paper, but it could be, it could also be a blowout. It's a little bit unpredictable.
The next one, Danny Silva, obviously Contender Series guy. One of my favorite fights of the Contender Series of all time.
Yeah.
This dude is an animal.
I remember you talking about him and being really high on him. So, he's fighting Bazookia, who he won his last fight, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's on a little bit of a streak. Am I wrong about that? What's it say on this guy? Let me see what
he lost two.
Okay. He lost two in a row though before that win. Okay. All right. So yeah, then if that's the case, Silva, yeah, I guess he just said all that needs to be said about him. Come out here and make it happen. No reason that that shouldn't be the case. And
then the next one, actually, Zachary Reese and Jose Medina. Jose Medina was the dude I was talking about on the Contender Series last year. When he fought, he was like insanely out of shape and overweight. And like during the commentating, like they're sitting there saying like, man, this guy could really just like drop like a class or two, and he would be like, and he's really fun to watch. He's somebody that can actually be somebody that people want to watch. And Zachary Reese is one of those dudes who might just slip up and make a mistake. A minus 500 tag on a dude who got slam knocked out. Like, I don't know. I mean, something was lacking there if you didn't think to let go. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. Was that his last fight that happened in? No, it was the fight before that. Yeah, because I remember I thought he was coming off of a win. So yeah, I mean he did kind of redeem himself after that because he did get that finish was pretty quick. If I think I said 20 seconds.
Yeah, but the opponent.
Yeah, I said doesn't necessarily tell the tale. But yeah, I mean I don't remember Medina on the Contender Series, but what I will say, just based on all of what you just said, and then also the fact that he is fighting out of Bolivia. Bolivia, an emerging market to be sure. He's off the top of my head the only Bolivian fighter that I can think of currently on the roster. There might be another one that I'm not immediately remembering, but either way, I would be leaning towards Reese. But yeah, I mean, minus 500 is a pretty hefty price tag. Probably a decent straight bet on that, on the dog, just because of the odds. But yeah, go out and get that win, Zachary Reese. Show that the slam knockout was a fluke.
Yeah, I want to say that maybe look out for Jose Medina to miss weight. He's cutting down. You know, he was light heavyweight before, and now he's got to get to middleweight. You know, it's not a crazy jump, but it's a lot, and he may get close, and he might miss by like a pound or two. But you know, law of averages. I mean, we're looking at statistics of people who miss weight, they win fights. So I'm thinking this might be the dark horse right here.
All right, there you go. Keep that in mind, everybody. Then we've got Vyacheslav Borshev versus Yontop over here. I like Vyacheslav Borshev. I know that he got fucking annihilated in his last fight. I think that is more of a credit to the amazing technicality of Chase Hooper in that fight, though. I got to believe that at least. I'm not counting Borshev out entirely just yet. Yontop, kind of also a guy
Another
that
contender series guy.
if he's the dude with the neck tattoo, right? So he did not look good at all. The PFC neck tattoo. That's why I remember him. He did not look good at all in that fight. I might probably lean towards him a little bit. Maybe that was, the big lights jitters, perhaps. But this would be a nice win for Borshev to get back in the win column and get himself back on track, because 7-4-1, that ain't gonna fly. And 7-5, you're out of here, buddy.
Gosh, this card has a lot of people who don't have a lot of fucking fights. Holy shit, I just noticed that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you start at the top, okay, so the third fight, Ryan Loder, of course, tough guys, six wins or whatever. And then you go down to Khan Ofly, 10 wins. 9 wins, Danny Silva, 12 wins for Dennis, 7 for Zachary Reese, 11 for Jose. It's like, dang, like these are all some fresh faces. This is the card for you to really make your name. You're not fighting under people who are bigger than you. This is where you become the biggest star on the card.
And that is what we always say about these types of cards, because we have a lot of friends in the Discord who talk about the quality level of these Fight Night cards and Apex cards and say, oh, why am I having to watch events every weekend if this is going to be the caliber, blah, blah, blah. This is where you see the cream rise to the top. I love these cards. Sometimes they do suck. I'm not going to lie. I mean, that the one, the last week, the one before 305 was not great. Yes, Spivak Tiberia. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Not a great card overall, but still it's necessary. And when you do have people who make it, a standout performance there, at least on that card, Yusuf Zalal showed out. You know what I mean? Like you have those flecks of it. And you see these people rising up through the sport on cards like this. Never count these ones out, because there could be very well in the future, especially if you're seeing Robert Valentin coming into the organization after what he's been doing on Tough. This could be one of those ones that you're like, man, I saw Robert Valentin from his first fight in the organization all the way up to a belt. I mean, I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it's, you know what I'm saying? I mean, like it's possible for these guys to go on to much bigger and better things. How many times have we seen people from the Contender Series go on to amazing careers? We've got a couple of champions who started out on the Contender Series at this point. So, these cards are ones to always keep an eye on and watch out for some really big standout performances, because they will inform what goes on in the future.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I guess that is about it. Of course, you know that we will be watching along for all of these fights, as I had mentioned. Right here on the Yama channel, myself and the Vitz King will be doing the watch-alongs on tomorrow and on Saturday for the Contender Series and Tough, and this card that we just went over a little bit here. My buddy Chase will also be doing watch-alongs as well, and I know, Chase, that you can tell them where they can find you at.
YouTube.com/@CP Smalls. And if I'm on Twitter and you're on Twitter and we want to talk some other shop, you can find me at Creative Partin, Partin.
Make sure you follow my boy. And I am at Yama Show on all social media and on Twitch, Kick, Trovo, and of course on YouTube, where you can find the full extent of the Yama catalog. We will be back for another stream next Monday to go over all of the fights that we will be seeing coming up. So make sure that you rock with us yet again. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Take good care. And most importantly, fight on.
Change.